Hello, this is Paul Hoyt, and welcome to our Office Hours presentation today. Office Hours is a relaxed, informal, and free mentoring program that I provide to my community. We hold them every Monday at noon Pacific time, and then we put the recordings available online with many of the previous week's recordings as well. And all the recordings from these Office Hours presentations will eventually be archived in our members area. So with our Office Hours presentations, we have an in-depth discussion of a business success principle. Then I have a few closing remarks and special offers and invitation for our next week's session. And then we go into open questions and answers. In the open questions and answers, we ask you first to ask questions that are focused on the topic of the day, and then you're welcome to ask whatever questions that you have about starting and growing a business. Today's topic is about strategic planning, your best tool for achieving your dreams. Once you get to know me, you'll know that I talk a lot about the key performance areas of business, which I define 7 of them: leadership, marketing, sales, financial management, operations and administration, product development, and customer service. And strategic planning is one of those activities that transcends all of the areas of business. In my Beyond Business Survival CEO training program, I talk about the responsibility that the leader of the company has to develop and execute great plans, both strategic plans and tactical plans. It's number 5 on the list of 7 success principles in the key performance area of leadership, and an extremely important one. We're going to go into strategic planning in depth today. So first I want to talk about what is strategy. I went and looked up a couple of definitions on the internet. Strategy is a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. It's also a careful plan or method for achieving a particular goal, usually over a long period of time. And somebody even said that a strategy were choices that were made to maximize long-term value. So then our strategic plan for our business defines our long-term business goals and the vision that we have. It is a plan of action to achieve your goals and create the vision that you have for your business. And I like to say it's the project plan by which you grow your business. You know, in a previous life, before I became a business consultant in 2001, I was an information systems professional. And in my 30-plus year career as an IT expert, we had project plans all the time. That's what we did, was create project plans, detailed specifications, general specifications, testing plans, functional requirements, all kinds of things. So I was a very experienced project manager of small projects and large projects over that 30-year career. So when I became a business consultant, I naturally gravitated to doing strategic planning for my clients because I was very familiar with project planning. And I came up with the quote that your strategic plan is the project plan by which you grow your business. And I'd like for you to think about it in terms of a chess game. So it's what are we going to do first, and then how are we going to respond based on how the market or our customers or our competitors may respond to our strategies, and then what are we going to do, and then what are we going to do. It is the step-by-step plan by which you grow your business short-term and long-term. And speaking of short-term, the corollary to strategic planning is tactical planning. Tactical planning then is short-term planning. It's how you carry out your objectives. It's the detailed and narrow actionable tasks. And typically those are defined as SMART goals. And I use as the SMART acronym: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bounded. As it turns out, there are many, many different labels that you can put on the initials of the word SMART there. But these are my favorite ones. Sometimes we have reasonable instead of realistic, or we see achievable in terms of instead of actionable. But these are the favorite ones that I have. But I see tactical planning then as a critical part of the strategic planning process. I don't think a strategic plan is done or complete unless you have the corresponding tactical plans, because the purpose of strategic plans is to create a plan of action that will be executed so that you can get the results that you want. Speaking of that, let's talk about why we plan in the first place a little bit. Here's a couple of 3 of my favorite quotes around planning. First of all, a goal is without a plan is just a wish. If you have a dream or if you have a vision and you may even express that in terms of a goal, unless it's a SMART goal, unless it's specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bounded, unless you turn that into a plan that you can actually execute, it's just that. It's just a dream. Here's one of my favorite quotes by Benjamin Franklin: "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." That's a little bit on the shadow side, but I like Benjamin because he's actually like one of my fifth great grandpas on the, and so I always claim his stuff as part of my own. But probably my favorite quote on strategic planning or planning in general is by Yogi Berra: "If you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else." So if you have a specific goal in mind, someplace that you want to end up with your business, to me, about the only way that you're really going to get there and get there efficiently is to create a strategic plan and then follow that plan. So generally speaking, we plan to accelerate the growth and increase the efficiency of our growth. We do it to reduce the probability of mistakes that we might make so we don't leave anything out. We do it to determine the resources required. We do it to communicate to our partners and investors and employees and our entire ecosystem the vision that we have for the company so that they can see it more clearly. And we use it to clarify and crystallize the vision or the what about what we're going to do, and to define and communicate the how, not only the what we intend to do and what we want to achieve, but the how. How are we going to get there? In general, plans are all about answering these three questions: where are you going, where are you today, and how are you going to get there? And those are the questions that are asked during the strategic planning process. But there's other benefits of a formal strategic planning process. Typically, with a formal strategic planning process, you get everyone's great ideas. So you don't create a strategic plan, in your office with the door closed. You create a strategic plan with your executive team so that you can get everyone's great ideas. And typically, you create a strategic plan with a facilitator like myself, somebody who's experienced in executing strategic planning sessions. And we have come not only with our process, but we come with our experience and come with our outsider's perspective. And frankly, we're not afraid to talk about things that other people at the company may be a little bit afraid to talk about. If you've got, a sacred cow, you can expect an outside facilitator to address that issue during the course of the strategic planning sessions. So formal strategic planning sessions allow you to gain consensus and buy-in, and they can improve relationships in morale. It becomes a bonding process for the people who participate in the strategic planning process. When they feel like that they have had the opportunity to contribute to plan, they're much more likely to roll up their sleeves and focus on executing the plan, because it's not just somebody else's plan. It's not the company's plan. It at least is, in part, is their plan. And they've got buy-in, and they've got commitment, and they've got focus on executing that plan. There are different types of strategic planning processes, and we're going to talk about a couple of different types today. We're going to talk about a strategic planning process that I use a lot with mature and large companies, and then we're going to talk about abbreviated strategic planning processes for startups or smaller companies, companies that have a much smaller budget. I'm not a believer that one size fits all, because it's been my experience that if you take the process that is generally the best process for a mature or a large company and put that in the context of a small company, that you're not going to get the results that you want. In fact, my experience is if you take this, if you put a very large and complex strategic plan in the hands of somebody that's not experienced with starting and growing a business and doesn't know exactly how to run those, then they're not going to be successful. In fact, I think it can be counterproductive. So I'm a big believer in having just the right amount of planning, just the right size of a plan based upon the capability of the business owner and the business team to execute that plan. Again, for large companies, a 2 or 3 day offsite process may be exactly what they need. For smaller companies, not so much. For smaller companies, a much smaller strategic planning and tactical planning process, I think, benefits them much more. Now, I'm going to talk about the 5 steps in a large company process. We start out with confidential interviews. Then we have a report of the findings of those, or a summary of the confidential interviews. Then we do the planning sessions themselves, then follow-ups and check-ins, and optionally, at the end of the process, a financial model. I'm going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. First, the confidential interviews. The confidential interviews we do with everybody who's going to participate in the strategic planning process. to give people a chance to be heard privately and confidentially, to address the issues which are not appropriate for the group to address, and to determine the fitness of the company to create and execute a plan. Let me give you an example of some of the things that I've had come up during these confidential interviews. I was working with one company where it was determined during the confidential interviews that the two partners, the two principals of the company, really just didn't get along. In fact, I would say they even hated each other. They didn't talk to each other in the hallways. They really had a lot of animosity. It was very, very clear that this company, although they could probably create a strategic plan, they were never going to be able to execute the plan. So instead, we stopped the process right after the confidential interviews and suggested that they execute some sort of a buyout arrangement between the two partners, so that there was only one of them left standing to guide the company going forward. And we did that. And when we did that, 45 days later, 60 days later, after they had determined which one of the two partners was going to be left standing, then we came back in and did the strategic planning process. I've had other people during the course of these confidential interviews say that we've already made a decision to replace one of our executive officers. So during the planning process itself, we don't want to talk about that so much. If you'd please kind of facilitate or dodge away from that issue, that would be great. I've also had CEOs say, that John and Sue are on the bubble. I really want them to participate in this planning process, so please call on them. Don't let them sit back and treat this as a vacation or treat this as if they're a prisoner. We want them to participate in the process, and we've done that. And one of my favorite ones of all time was interviewing 7 executives at a company, the CEO and 6 of their direct reports, and finding out that 5 of the 6 people were getting ready to leave the company because the CEO was just not a comfortable person to deal with. Again, like in the first example, we decided that even though the company might be able to create a strategic plan, they were never going to be able to execute it because they were going to have too much turnover with their executive team in the next 6 to 12 months. So we declined to continue with that process. Once we get through with all of the confidential interviews, which are, again, designed to allow me as a facilitator or us as facilitators the opportunity to talk about the things which are not necessarily appropriate for talking about in a group session, then we come to the report of findings. Most often, the report of findings is a summary of all of the confidential interviews, working very hard and diligently not to direct any of those or not to let anybody's comments be identified back to them during the report of findings unless they've specifically given us permission to do so. Usually this is done at the first part of the planning sessions, but sometimes we do it separate from that, depending upon what we find during the confidential interviews. The next step, the third step in the planning process, is to do the planning sessions themselves. They're typically off-site and very focused, with no cell phones and no email except during the breaks. I like to go to hotels or off-site locations so that people aren't bothered by the phone ringing in their office, and that they're not bothered by people dropping by and banging on the conference room door. One of the rules is that everybody speaks. There are no prisoners here and no vacationers here, so I do take turns calling on everybody to make sure that not only everybody speaks, but everybody listens as well. Oftentimes during a strategic planning process, there'll be 1 or 2 individuals who really enjoy the opportunity to be heard by the crowd, and part of my job as a facilitator is to cut them off and suggest that it's time to hear somebody else speak up and call on people when they're not participating. Everything gets discussed, like we said, except for some of those extremely confidential things, but we like to talk about sacred cows, we like to talk about the elephant in the room, we like to talk about the things which nobody is happy to talk about, because in the planning sessions it's kind of a safe environment with me as a facilitator there. I can oftentimes find a way to talk about things that are very difficult to talk about otherwise. Everything gets recorded so that there is a recording, or at least a scribe is assigned so that all of the action steps and especially all of the commitments are recorded. And it's a brainstorming, a consensus and buy-in process. Those are the primary objectives: to get everybody's ideas, to get everybody to participate in the process so that we have the synergy that comes from brainstorming and masterminding sessions, and everybody feels like that they had an opportunity to participate in the planning process, so we get their buy-in and we get their commitment and we get a consensus among the team. During the planning sessions, we talk about a lot of things. I'm going to go over like 10 or 12 of these right now. It always starts with talking about core values, which have a tendency to really focus the team and get them to bond together even more. Then we talk about the vision for the company, and if the company doesn't have a vision statement that expresses how they really want to be seen in the marketplace, we take time to create a vision statement for the company or update the vision statement for the company. Then we talk about long-term and mid-term goals. Where do you want to be in 50 years, in 10 years, in 5 years, in 2 years, and help people paint the picture of the business that they want to create, the future that they want to create for themselves in a little bit more clarity. And then we start with where are we today by talking about the history and the significant milestones and achievements that you've had along the way. What are your current products and services? What are your current markets and industries? And what trends and opportunities do you see in those markets and industries as we go forward? Then we oftentimes develop a product development roadmap, taking a look at all of the ideas that the company has or the plans that the company has for creating new products and services, and put those in terms of a sequenced plan. What are you going to do first? What are you going to do next? And what are you going to do after that? During the planning sessions, we talk about your marketing positioning, especially your competitive positioning, and whether you're seen as a quality leader or an efficiency leader, or whether your value proposition to the marketplace is somewhat different. We take a look at market expansion opportunities. Do you have the opportunity to bring new products and services to your existing customer base? Do you have an opportunity to expand your customer base locally or in some way through a digital or a virtual platform? We do a SWOT analysis, which talks about your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats, and really helps define in more detail your competitive positioning. And then we have a very interesting thing that we talk about, which is what's working and what not, and what is not working. What departments are not functioning the way that we would like for them to? Which ones are really outstanding strength areas for the company? Which products and product lines are not performing well, or which ones are performing extremely well? Where are you making most of your money? Where are you losing money? Which products and product lines are you losing money with? Which locations are doing really well? Are there any locations which need to be expanded? Any locations which need to be shut down? Are there any product lines which need to be shut down and discontinued? This can be a very interesting and rich discussion, as you might imagine, on what's working and what's not with the company. And then what are your high-level growth strategies? Now that we have defined where you want to go, where you are today, and how you're going to get there, how are we going to actually execute this? Are we going to expand through acquisition? Are we going to expand through franchising? Are we going to expand through licensing other people's intellectual property, or licensing our intellectual property out to other folks? We talk about those high-level growth strategies and end with your critical competencies and success factors. And that's typically takes us through about half or even 60% of the strategic planning process. Again, we want to talk about everything that needs to be talked about. We want to discuss everything that needs to be discussed so that you can have a lot of buy-in for the plan going forward. And we want to talk about all of the different areas of business during the planning process. Again, the key performance areas. We need to talk about all of them. We need to talk about the marketing strategy. How are you going to reach your market, and how are you going to position yourself in the marketplace? How are you going to generate leads? What partnerships and alliances are you going to have? We want to talk about your product development strategy. Who's going to develop the products, and in which sequence are you going to develop the products? We want to talk about how you're going to sell your products. Who is going to do the selling? Are you going to use a direct sales approach with your own team, or are you going to sell through channel partners? Are you going to sell through distributors, agents, brokers? Or are you going to distribute on home shopping network or some sort of direct response mechanism? How are you going to reach your consumers, and who's going to take the money, and how are you going to take the money? I want to talk about your infrastructure. Where are your offices? How about your legal infrastructure, your intellectual property infrastructure, your computing infrastructure, your office infrastructure, your manufacturing facilities, etc. We want to talk about your partnership and alliance strategy, typically as part of your overall marketing strategy, but partnerships and alliances can be more than just marketing partnerships. They can be technology development partnerships. They can be delivery partnerships. They can really transcend the area of marketing. And we want to talk about your financial strategy. How are you going to fund your growth? How much capital do you need? And your service strategy. Who's going to deliver your products and services to the client? Is it going to be a fulfillment house or your in-house folks? And how are you going to handle all your customer service issues? Once we developed all of these sub-strategies, then we go into taking the long-term plan and making it more of a midterm or an achievable plan through the implementation of a phased growth strategy. This is something that I created for my strategic planning engagements and trademarked the term phased growth strategy. It's really a blend of all of the work that I did in information systems, a combination of the Microsoft Solutions framework from the early 1990s and some large activities we were doing with data warehousing back then. But the gist of it is that you want to find out where your low-hanging fruit is, and you want to take this future that you're creating for yourself and break it into different chunks. And I break them into phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of your growth. In other words, what are you going to do first? What are you going to do after that? And then what are you going to do after that? And they have different time frames. So this is just a representative one, where you'll see that the time frame for phase 1 is 3 months. You're going to have just 2 products, products A and product B, and we anticipate $100,000 in sales over the course of the next 3 months. And the people on the team, there's just a couple of executives on the team. After that, we're going to expand, and during the next 6 months, we're going to introduce product C. We're going to quintuple our sales to $500,000 over those 6 months, and we're going to add a couple of administrative assistants. And in the following year, we're going to add another product, product D. We're going to triple our sales, and we're going to add a couple of service representatives. So this is an example of a real phased growth strategy that I helped a company create, and an example of a phased growth strategy or a phased growth plan that you might have for your business as well. But once we've determined the midterm goals and the step-by-step process that we're going to get there, then we come to the tactical part. And I'm a big fan of 90-day plans, where we take the top 3 to 5 goals and all of the supporting tasks that we defined in the context of the long-term planning sessions and the midterm planning sessions, and detail those out month by month with detailed assignments and due dates and who's going to be responsible for those, and augment that with other activities in the key performance areas so that you have detailed plans now. When the strategic planning session is finished, that you've got a detailed plan that you can go back and everybody knows what their assignments are, and you can begin to manage that according to a 90-day plan. And I have my 90-day growth plan template that I use in a lot of my consulting engagements, and I've had clients actually use that in their monthly and weekly staff meetings for years and years and years, to keep the focus of the executive team on the 90-day plan and on the top 3 to 5 goals that they are committed to executing. After that comes our follow-ups and check-ins. Typically we'll have weekly, monthly, or quarterly follow-up processes or meetings, as a part of the overall strategic planning programs, and sometimes providing support to senior or mid-level management for coaching and execution support. So if somebody's responsible for executing a key component of the overall growth strategy, it can be really helpful for them to have a mentor or a partner or a coach to help them through the challenges that they're inevitably going to experience during the execution phases of the plan. And then I always recommend that you do an annual replan. And speaking about annual replans, it's now about the middle of October, almost the 1st of November. Pretty soon it's going to be time for you to create your strategic plan for 2014. And if you're listening to this recording, maybe it's already in 2014 and you've yet to create your strategic plan for the year. I think it's always good to, in the month of December or in the month of January, to take your executives off-site and gather them together and talk about what you're going to achieve during the next calendar year. It seems to be a really nice, logical, comfortable time of year in order to do your strategic plans. So I encourage you to consider that if you haven't already considered that. Optionally, the 5th step of the large company strategic planning process is the financial model. Oftentimes it's real important to define that cost of expansion, and especially the cash that you need to expand your businesses. And it's oftentimes required if you're going to raise capital. You need to know how much capital that needs to be raised and what the uses of those proceeds are going to be. I'm a big fan of doing month-by-month income statements, balance sheets, and cash flow, because in my experience, you really don't know what your cash requirements are, and you really don't know what your financial condition is until you do this level of month-by-month planning process and come up with investor-grade financial projections. And as we oftentimes say, that once you put the numbers to the plan, it may cause you to alter the plan. This happens to me quite frequently, that when you do the financial models, you find out that it's product C instead of products A and B where you're likely to get the most money, or where your low-hanging fruit really is and where your best return on investment is. So it can cause you to go back in and restructure your plans once you've put the numbers to the plan and see how the plan really will hold out when it comes to the financial models. So that's it. That's the large company process, the 5-step large company process. Confidential interviews, reports of the findings, the planning sessions themselves, typically 2 or 3 days and held off-site, the follow-ups and the check-ins, which can last for weeks or months after the plan is created, and optionally the financial model. That's a lot different than a small company process. A small company process has much shorter planning sessions, 2 hours, 4 hours, or 8 hours, depending upon the budget and the number of people that need to participate in the process. And after that, you may get a very simple phased growth strategy where we just talk about, in general, at a high level, what do you want to accomplish in the next 3 months, and then the 6 months after that, and in the following year after that. It always ends up at the same place the large company strategic planning process ends up, and that's with a 90-day plan and a budget. And then follow-ups on a monthly or quarterly basis or an annual replanning basis. So the bottom line is very small companies don't have exactly the same process that large companies have, but we do always talk about where do you want to go, where are you today, and then how are you going to get there with the hows and the whys and the tactics of executing the plan for the business. Some companies hardly even need a strategic planning session at all. I created this strategic plan for a hot dog stand in a matter of about 5 minutes. It's real simple. You pick a fun and simple brand that you can trademark and expand with. You find a great location. You offer a variety of hot dogs and condiments. You sell candy and soft drinks. You show up every day, and you're happy for and with your customers, and you listen to your customers and focus on relationships. So if any of you listening to this call today want to start a hot dog stand, and I have had people threaten to actually dump the business idea they had and start a hot dog stand instead because it's a far simpler business model, here's your strategic plan. It only takes like 5 or 10 minutes. Larger companies, bigger companies require a much more extensive strategic planning process, but not every company requires, you know, a $20,000 process where you go off-site and meet for a couple of days when the company is very simple and the plan is very, very simple. But the most important thing, whether you've got a hot dog stand or you've got a $20 million company with 8 executives and you want to grow to 30 million and 40 million, 50 million, no matter what size of company that you are, the most important thing is that it's not about the plan. The plan is a tool. It's about achieving your desired outcomes. The plan is not the end game. It is a tool for you to achieve your end game, to define your end game, and then go after it. One of my favorite quotes comes from my mentor back in Denver, Colorado, a gentleman named Dave Mead with the Mead Consulting Group. He taught me early on that a mediocre plan well executed is far superior to a complex plan that just sits on the shelf. Nothing, well, there are very few things that upset me, but one of the things that gets to me a lot is when a company spends $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on a strategic planning process and then they don't execute the darn thing. Because success is in the execution. I oftentimes say that success is 1% having a vision or a dream for your business. Then it's 2% having a plan for your business, and it's 97% the execution of that plan. And for those of you who are more visually oriented, here's what it looks like visually. That little blue sliver up there, that's your dream, that's your vision. The orange that's sitting next to it, slightly larger, is the plan that you put in place. I say that 97% of your success is in the execution. It's in that day-to-day activities. On a weekly basis, by the way. That means that we spend 1 hour on Monday morning or Sunday night planning our week and 39 hours or more executing the plan that we put in place. So success is all about the execution. And one of my favorite sayings is that if you can't execute a 90-day plan, you have no hope whatsoever of executing a 5-year plan. So regardless of who you are and what you do, think about your long-term goals and objectives, your midterm goals and objectives, and then translate those into your tactical detailed tasks in terms of a 90-day plan, and go for it. And practice becoming a company that can not only create plans, but can execute those plans as well. Focus on the tasks at hand. Do them well, do them quickly, and then move on to the next task at hand. And become a goal-driven company, a company that is known for achieving the plans that you put in place. So here's your homework and your exercise. Think about the level of planning that you need. Think about a budget to create the plan. Is your budget a couple of $100, or is your budget $20,000? Think about your budget to implement the plan. Do you have just a few $100 or a few $1,000 to implement the plan that you create, or do you have hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars that are at your disposal for new marketing programs, new products that you're developing, market expansion programs, staffing programs, etc.? In which case, of course, you would probably want a much more detailed and robust strategic planning process. But think about what's right for you, because it doesn't do you any good, again, to create a plan unless you have the wherewithal, both the mindset and the attitude, but also the resources to implement the plan that you create. I always recommend that you interview at least 3 planning specialists. I'm happy to be one of those, but don't just talk to me, talk to other people as well, so that you can pick the person that's going to be just right for you to facilitate your process, to help you get the great plan and help that you can in fact execute. And then create a plan and execute, execute, execute. That concludes the presentations for today. We're going to have open questions and answers in just a minute. Hopefully your comments and questions on the topic of the day, and then any other issues that you might want to address during the course of our conversation. But first I want to make a few closing remarks. First of all, I want to extend an invitation to you to join my tribe at Skype. My Skype address is Paul Hoyt. We keep all of your information private there, but it's a small community for those who come together and help each other start and grow our businesses. And I encourage you to study. Watch the Business Survival Boot Camp that most of you got at a discounted price when you signed up for this webinar, and learn about key survival strategies, business complexity profiles, and a lot more. And then I encourage you to continue your education by purchasing and studying my Beyond Business Survival program. That's the critical small business owner training. It's what you need to know when you're the CEO. It helps you make good decisions, avoid the mistakes that will slow you down and shut you down. And I really have seen this program save people $10,000, $20,000, or $50,000 or more. And as a small business owner, you can't afford to make very many mistakes. It will slow you down, or it will shut you down. So I strongly encourage you to get the education that you need. Beyond Business Survival is an online audio program with exercises and transcripts. You can go through it as often as you like. It's downloadable to your computer, your iPhone, or your Kindle, and there's a private note area just for you so you can keep notes as you go through the program. I also offer a variety of services. I'm available for group coaching, private mentoring, of course, strategic planning services. Also write financial or business plans and help people create financial models. I'm available for radio interviews, webinars, teleseminars, and I've got a very generous affiliate program in place too. And any of your kind words, if you like this program, any of the other programs, or the services that we provide, please send your kind words to me at paul@paulhoyt.com, or any other questions that you have about starting and growing businesses too. Next Monday, our topic will be on getting stuff done, the keys to massive productivity. So once you've created your plans, then how do you actually do this? So we're going to be offering tips and techniques on increasing the productivity, increasing the efficiency of your company, and talking about things with, yes, that term, time management or scheduling or priorities. So next week, if you want to ramp up your productivity and get more done in the time that you have, then I encourage you to see that presentation. And watch the Business Survival Boot Camp in the meantime and do your homework. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. Joni is my assistant on the call. I forgot to introduce her when we started. And Joni, I can hear a little bit of an echo. I see you coming off of mute.
Oh, am I echoing still?
When I talk, it is echoing. But I'm not hearing an echo when you talk.
Okay, well, I'll try to mute myself quickly. Thank you, Paul, for introducing me. I wanted to ask you at the beginning, how did your book launch go?
Oh, well, thank you very much. As most of you know, I launched a new book last week called The Practice of Awakening 2, The First Light of Joy. as you get to know me, you'll know that as passionate as I am about business growth, I am equally passionate about personal growth. So not only do I write books that are focused for small business owners and create information products that are focused on helping small business owners accelerate their growth and increase their probability of success, I also write books that are focused on personal growth too. So this is my third inspirational book, The Practice of Awakening 2, The First Light of Joy. And I think you can still go to thefirstlightofjoy.com and get dozens of free bonus gifts for those who purchase the book. But the good news is the book launch went extremely well. I achieved Amazon #1 bestseller status for a day or so I can claim to be a best-selling author. And most importantly, I really spread the word about being an advocate for personal growth to lots of people, to thousands of people out there. So thanks for asking, Joni. I appreciate that. And for those who want to know that side of who I am, you can go to thefirstlightofjoy.com and get a lot more information on my new inspirational book. So next question, Joni.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask you, Paul, about strategic planning. Now, does somebody need to already have an outline of what they want to go over with you if they were to work with you, or do you kind of help them get to that point?
We help them get to that point. I think it's a really good idea to have some sort of an idea about the company that you want to create. Sometimes I get business owners, I oftentimes hand them a napkin and a pen and have them write down their business idea for the very first time. And if they don't have an idea, then I strongly encourage them to get a business model or to get some sort of vision for the business they want to create. So many of you out there are members of an entrepreneurial organization called CEO Space. And at CEO Space, oftentimes people come and they showed up on Saturday thinking that they wanted to be a landscaper, and by Sunday they figure out they want to start a business for therapy dogs for children. They really get totally 180 degrees off their original intention, because it's an environment where people can discover what their true passions are. And we encourage people to create businesses around their passions because they'll have a much better chance of success. In those moments where you really don't have any idea about the business that you want to create, then we can't create a plan because we don't know where to go. The first step of a strategic planning process, or any planning process, is the definition of where do you want to go. And if you can't answer that question about the business that you intend to create, then it's not appropriate for you to do a strategic planning process or a tactical planning process or any sort of a planning process, because you need to define the where do you want to go. So that's when we have a masterminding team or a brainstorming session or a vision team of some kind to help you define the direction that you want to move the company in, and just some of the very fundamentals and the basic about the business model. Next question, Johnny.
Sure. So then if somebody has a desire then to have their own business, however, they don't know exactly what they want to do you do the masterminds with them so that they can sort of find what their passion is?
Yeah, you bet. And I've attended a lot of those masterminding sessions. It just can be a 1-hour call with me or somebody else that's seen so many businesses out there. And I got to tell you, there's a huge difference in between working at 3 or 4 businesses over a course of career and working with hundreds of business owners and training thousands more. It's very interesting how your perspective develops over time, and how you can take the ideas that have been really good for one business owner and share them to the advantage of another business owner. So yeah, I do that in a couple of different ways. One of the things I have is a business clarity questionnaire. So if you've got an inkling of what the business is that you want to create, then my business clarity questionnaire, which you can get, just send me an email to paul@paulhoyt.com, and I'll be happy to send that to you. That can help you define the business a lot more and help both of us understand where you are in the process of defining your business model, and creating the business that you want to create. But yeah, I do that a lot, and I also recommend that people do it with masterminding and brainstorming sessions with more than just myself. Get several people involved in the process, because you get a lot better ideas that way.
Wonderful.
Next question, Johnny.
Yes. So you talked a little bit about the 90-day plan earlier. If somebody cannot execute that during that time frame, would you say then that's because what they're doing isn't working, or maybe it's because it's not a good plan for them? How do you figure that out for them, and then maybe go back and start over with the 90 days?
There's a lot of reasons why people are not able to execute the plans. It could be that the market didn't respond in the way that you wanted it to. If phase one was, if month one we were going to do market research, and month two we were going to adjust our plan, and month three we were going to launch our plan or launch our product, and when you come back from the market research and it shows that nobody wants to buy your stuff and really causes you to turn the business a lot, we call that pivoting the business based upon market research, then you can't execute the plan for a really, really good reason, and that's because the market hasn't responded in a way that's favorable to the plan that you put out there. Other times, however, I see companies not executing a plan because things are largely not in their control. I've seen, stuff happens. People leave, people come and go with a business. Bad things can happen from a cash flow point of view. Airplanes can crash, and boats can sink, and hurricanes can strike our shores. There's lots of things that will cause a company's plan to be derailed temporarily. But one of the biggest reasons I see that companies fail to achieve a 90-day plan is a lack of focus and commitment, especially with creative people. Business owners, especially entrepreneurs, have a tendency to be very creative people and come up with 15 or 20 projects that they're working on simultaneously. I'm one of those people. I'm a very creative person. I've typically got, a book that I'm writing, a book that's almost done, and a book that I just launched, and 2 or 3 other projects going. And it's critical for me and for many of my colleagues and clients out there to focus, focus, focus. And next week when we talk about, really accelerating your productivity, we'll talk about some of those focus techniques. But that's the biggest reason I see for business owners not achieving their 90-day plans, and that is a lack of focus, a little bit too much creativity and not enough focus and commitment to executing the plans that they create. Next question.
I know all about that. I have a little too much creativity myself, and I get trapped in that sometimes. Oh, so somebody would like to know where you ranked with your book sales.
I got to be a #1 bestseller on Amazon in my category. So Amazon has bestseller rankings for each one of they have a few dozen categories. And at one point in time, we hit number 1,500 overall, which, of course, Amazon sells hundreds of thousands of books every day, and at one point in time, we were number, I think, 1,500 on the list. So we got up there. We didn't get to be a top number one or number 2 or number 3 overall bestseller with Amazon, but I was very pleased with the opportunity to achieve bestseller status for a day or so in my category.
Very exciting, Paul.
Next
very good. So yes, if somebody did a planning session with you, is that a 3-hour thing or a 3-day thing? How would that look?
It really depends on the company. Let me give you a couple of examples. So I have a small business success package, which is my entry-level program for businesses that are just getting started. It's very inexpensive. It's four sessions of about 90 minutes each, and we tailor that based upon where the business is. The first thing that the business always does is fills out their business clarity questionnaire, and on the basis of their answers, we decide what's going to be necessary to be covered or most valuable to be covered during the following planning sessions. Sometimes one of those planning sessions, a 90-minute session, is on developing the phased growth plan or the mid-level plan, the mid-level growth plan of how you're going to get there. So in those cases, a 90-minute session focused on your strategic plan is really appropriate for that company because they don't have a lot of money to invest in a strategic planning process, and we really don't even know how much money they have to execute a plan that might be created. So we just want to spend the bare amount to understand a little bit more about the business model so that we can create a 90-day plan and create a budget associated with that and give them a really good springboard into making progress in their business. On the other hand, I created strategic plans for companies that had $30 million in revenue. And for them, the appropriate thing to do was a 3-day off-site session. I worked actually in one company, I interviewed 30 of their people at the companies. It took 3 or 4 days because the interview questions or sessions are about an hour each. It took like 4 full days to run through and interview 30 of the principals that he wanted to have interviewed before we began the strategic planning session. The strategic planning were 3 full days, and then I followed up with another day and a half working with their CFO to help create the financial model. And then we went into execution support mode, and I visited their site every month for like 12 months to work with their mid-level managers, their project managers, and some of their executives on the creation, not the creation, but on the implementation of the plan. So it really varies. As I said during the presentation, I'm not a believer at all that one size fits all. In fact, my sad experience has been, if you take a really complex plan, take a 5-year plan that's very detailed and put that in the hands of an inexperienced business owner, it is counterproductive. It will shut them down. They'll take a look at the plan and say, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be in business and I have no hope of executing this, and they'll just go away. So I'm a big believer in giving people plans that they can implement, plans that they can execute, and plans that really provide results to them to help them create the business that they're capable of creating. Next question, Joni.
Thank you. You did just mention budget, and I wanted to ask if you had any resources so people can actually make an estimate or a guesstimate on budget and do that accurately.
I certainly do, and one of the things that I've done a lot, I've created like 150 investor-grade financial models. It's typically a 6 to 8 hour process that we do in the course of one day or do in the course of a couple of 4-hour sessions over a couple of days. And that's one thing that I do at the end of a formal strategic planning session for very large companies or with companies with whom I'm helping create a business plan. The investor-grade financials is oftentimes a real valuable part of a business plan if somebody's going to raise capital especially. But we have other budgetary plans too. As a part of the small business success package, typically the last 2 90-minute sessions are on the 90-day growth plan and on creating the first step financial plan, which is their high-level budget that they need to apply for the next 6 months or so in the business growth. So, and we got everything in between as well. Next question, Joy.
Yes. So one of the critical business challenges that is seen in setting up a marketing analysis to verify that they're approaching the market in the right fashion is what do you suggest entrepreneurs need to do to zero in on their appropriate market and their approach to get away from the quote unquote, this is the greatest product in the world and everybody needs to buy it?
The number one success principle in the area of marketing is listen to your market. I talk about that in the Business Survival Bootcamp and certainly in Beyond Business Survival. Listening to your market, and not just after you've created the product, but before you create the product. So when you have the idea for a product, you survey what you think is going to be your potential market and see whether or not they have any idea that they would like to purchase your product and at what price they might want to purchase it. And you make adjustments to your plans based upon that response. Then you create the prototype for your product and you give that to your market and survey them again. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? How much would you pay for this? What's your likelihood of referring this, etc. And you continue to listen to the market at every step along the way, and even after a product is launched, you continue to listen to the market and continue to ask the questions, what should we add to the product? What should we leave out of the product? How would you change the product? How would it become more valuable to you? What would you like to see us do different? What complementary products would you like to have in addition to this product, etc.? So it's really about listening to the market while you're in the planning phases for a product, when you're first developing the product, and at every step along the way. Next.
Well, I think that's all our questions for today. Oh, look, we have one more. So how early in the startup company process should we get you involved, Paul?
Now. The answer is almost always now. If you've got an idea, listen to the concepts and principles I talk about in the Business Survival Bootcamp, which again, most of you got at a very reduced cost. And if you determine after listening to that I'm the type of person that you want on your team to shoot straight with you, give you practical advice and common sense advice and won't be blowing smoke up your skirt, then pick up the phone and give me a call. We'll fill out your business clarity questionnaire. Either you're welcome to fill it out on your own, or we're welcome to fill that out together as the first of the 4 sessions that we have in the Small Business Success Program, or Small Business Success Package, and get started. And again, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of business owners to help them take those first critical steps in starting and growing their business, to help them make sure that their next steps or their first steps are the right steps to really, really increase their probability of survival and accelerate their growth. So the answer is always now. Thank you for asking. Anything else, Jenny?
Somebody just wants to verify that they can get in touch with you via your email address. Is that correct?
Yep, Paul at paulhoyt.com. It's very simple. Just send it on to Paul at paulhoyt.com. I'll be happy to respond to you. And my telephone number is 415-997-8001. 415-997-8001. And I'd be honored to have a conversation with you about where you are in your business and how I can support you in your plans to grow it.
Well, that's all the questions for today, yes.
Well, thank you very much for attending. I really appreciate everybody that attended live and everybody that's listening to this recording. Again, next week, our office hours is going to be on increasing your productivity, getting things done, and becoming massively productive in your business. We hope to talk to you again there. This is Paul Hoyt wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Bye-bye.